James, welcome to the big show.
Hi, Clint. Hi, Clint. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It is my honor completely to have you on, James. And I was just wondering, tell about your own spiritual journey a little bit. I'd be curious to know.
Wow, yeah, big question.
Yeah.
So, so I mean, I'll start way back. Obviously, people know me maybe now for being connected to the Franz Barden tradition, and Perseus, but way before that, I was always kind of seeking. And I kind of remember. I think I've mentioned it before. Is when you used to watch movies like Star Wars and things like this, and magical movies. And I always used to think, I'd like to be able to do that. I'd like to have the answers. I don't want to have a wand. I want the powers within me, So I was always on this search for finding answers, which then led me into martial arts and trying to find those answers in the internal arts and qigong, things like this. Um, and I was, there's a big famous bookshop in London called Watkins, um, and so I would go down there at any opportunity and just sit there for hours, reading through all the books, reading through the Swami Rama books, reading through the Kriya yoga books, reading through the Buddhism Taoist books, and just trying to find and approach something, right? So that led me. Tell me if you want me to stop at some point, because I'll just recount the whole history. Um, so that led me into Buddhism very early. It led me into Buddhism, specifically the Nyingma uh, branch of Tibetan Buddhism, um, and specifically the Pao and the Peno Rinpoche lineage of the Nyingma tradition. Um, so for anyone who knows that, it's a lot of work. The foundation practice is 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 of this mantra, 100,000 of that mantra. Um, and I kind of joined that because at the height of the Buddhist traditions, of that tradition is something called the Jalu, the dodging, the Jalu, the rainbow body. And that was kind of my goal. I thought, rainbow body, that's what I'm after. So that's why I kind of stayed in that tradition for a while, the Nyingma tradition for a while. But I kind of found that my personality, maybe my ego, doesn't work well with a Rinpoche telling me exactly what I should do and what I shouldn't do in my life. So so I left that, seeking answers elsewhere. And then basically I was in a an Essenic tradition. Um, so sort of loosely connected to, the prior. I'm not good on the history, but the group prior to Christ, um, and the Essenes and those practices came from an Indonesian tradition, bizarrely. Um, and I was in that practice for a while, which is basically a mix of the Essenic and Kejuin, which is the Indonesian sort of shamanic traditions, um, which was mixed in with the martial arts, um, and was kind of interesting because it was a mix of physical practices, mental, energetic practices, um, which would be kind of conjoined through, we would say, like sacred dance or kambangan, which is like a sacred dance where you bring all this stuff together, which is connected to the martial arts as well. So that I was in for a while, but again, I didn't find the answers that I was looking for. Um, at that point, I left that tradition and basically I left London, I left England and went to Asia. And I was still seeking something. And it was at that point when I was in Asia in 2008 when I found Franz Barden. And I was like, I kind of was like a sense of relief, um, because no longer did I have to sort of wait for the master to give me the information. right? Because in that situation, I'm always a bit anxious, you know. All right, the master might have the truth, but what if he dies? He doesn't give me doesn't give me the material. So having the book was a great relief. I felt, oh, I've just all I've got to do now is do it. Um, and so at that point, I was like, oh, thank God. And that was in 2008, and I practiced it along for, again, stop me at any point. I practiced along.
You're free to go on. I'm enjoying listening.
Okay. I practiced along for, I think it was about 3 years. And I took very seriously the idea that I needed to perfect the step. Um, and at that point, I had basically zero ability to visualize. Way my bodies are, you know, the physical, the astral, the mental are put together. Um, Visualization is just not really a function that I had. Um, so I was like, how on earth am I going to pass step two? How am I going to get past this? Um, so I was searching out everywhere. I had even had one teacher tell me, due to my astrology, that I would never achieve the visualization. I chose to ignore them. Um, and then I got in contact with Mark Rasmus, Super Mark Rasmus, and we corresponded. This was back in 2012, I believe, and before he was that well known. And he was very helpful, just giving me great answers, corresponding back and forth. And I thought, you know what, I need to go and see this guy. So I went out to Thailand. I was in Taiwan at the time, so it was just a short flight over to Thailand. And I spent a week with him. And in that week, he basically took me through the whole book. Um, each exercise by exercise, and the goal being not to perfect that exercise, but to gain a success in that exercise, no matter how small that exercise, that success might be. But to basically, because you know, you're training your subconscious, right? So if every time, this is the way Mark explained it to me, he was saying, look, you're doing visualization this way, and you already know you can't do it. And then you go and do it again, and again you can't do it. So you're reinforcing this negative cycle. And so there's an expectation of failure, and therefore the probability of failure gets more and more. All right. So he had me doing other exercises and basically reframing the idea of visualization instead of it being some kind of IMAX 3D hologram in front of me, that it's a mental exercise. Yeah, it's clearly a mental ex. And so we reframed what that would be and what success in that exercise would be, and we did it. You know, so like for instance, imagine like a food that you love, yeah, or a person that you love. Somewhere there's a someone who has or something that has a a strong emotional charge for you, yeah. And so when you start doing it like that, you know, maybe my favorite chocolate cake, right? And and I think that, oh, I can see that. I can see in my mind's eye that chocolate cake. And so Mark would be like, all right, great. Okay, let's just hang on to that chocolate cake, investigate that chocolate cake, look at the top of the chocolate cake, the sides, right? And before you know it, a couple of minutes have gone by. And there's your success. Suddenly you've gained success in the exercise. You can tick it off. And now suddenly your subconscious is going, oh, that there's new information. We can do this, right? So you've built an experience of success. And this is what he would do in each of the exercises. And this is why people progress so well, because unless the subconscious bias is dealt with, you can be doing everything right, but you're still expecting to fail. And therefore you don't really get anywhere. Whereas if you turn off that bias, so you start having your subconscious work in the same direction, having it expect success, suddenly, oh, you get success, you tick it off, and then momentum builds. You get another success, and momentum builds, and you start going through the exercises very quickly. So this is what we did in that week. Um, and he taught me far more than I could remember. But it was those seeds allowed me to start making progress. And then I went back a few years later to see Mark and to basically do that again. Um, and then since then, I've just been working, and until now, here we are.
All right, that is fantastic, and that's beautiful. You were able to get some help from Mark and gain some confidence so there's not
Mm.
the expectation of failure. That makes perfect sense to me. I think a lot of times people bang their head up against the wall in some
Yeah,
of the early steps, and it's just this self-perpetuating cycle. So yeah,
absolutely.
that is fantastic. And I guess I'm curious, other than the 10 steps of initiation into Hermetics, have you explored, uh, you know, some of the other books in the trilogy?
Yeah, I mean, um, just doing the things with Mark, you kind of naturally do. In that, for instance, the elements that are trained as Kabbalah. You see this in Bob's training as well. In that, instead of us just working on the element uh, as Barden describes in the astral body training, um, in the astral part of the training, we actually start training it through the mother letters, right, of the Kabbalic mother letters relating to the element. So right from the early training, you're training the sound, you're training the color, you're training the feeling right from the early training. So by the time you come to the latter stages of the first book, you already have you've kind of, if you like, anchored these things. You've trained these things so much that they're a natural part of you. The sound, the color, you can instantly get that because you've been doing it. And another stage of that is that you'll do that not only just in the astral form, you'll do it through, you'll do it above your head, you'll do it in the mental, you'll do it in the astral, and you'll do it in the physical, and you'll do that. So you'll do, say, like just recently, for example, I did 20 hours of each element, and I did it every time I would do that hour. I would do 15 minutes in Akasha level, 15 minutes mental, 15 minutes astral, 15 minutes physical, and so that way, um, this is something I know it's not the traditional approach, but that way you find that latter training with the letters comes a lot quicker. So yeah, you're with Mark, you're already mixing that in. Also, with in terms of spirits, he would invite entities in. So you'll see in some of his videos, he would invite a sun spirit in to facilitate the training that they're doing at that time, because that training connects to that spirit. So yeah, you naturally have an experience of this because that's the way Mark teaches. And for me, after training with Mark, yeah, I went from being strictly by the book to taking on a more flexible approach. So yeah, I trained the letters as the elements as the Kabbalic letters. I train with the Kabbalah, the third book in mind. I've not investigated, in all honesty, the second book as much because I feel I've got so much more work to do with the third book. Um, and also, of course, the first book I kind of see is it's steps 1 to 8, and then 9 and 10 is kind of forever, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do. I do. I'm right there myself with you.
Yeah. It's like I don't think I can ever say 9 and 10 is complete. It's like the more insight I will get from the third book and the second book, the more meaningful and insightful steps 9 and 10 become. Um, it's a different type of training. It's kind of like a loop, a feedback loop. You're going to develop and you're going to come back and then see steps 9 and 10 change. So yeah, right now, instead of like a hierarchical linear approach, I'm very much sort of floating between my work in IIH and the work in KTQ, and then bringing that those benefits back to IIH. That's how I'm working at the moment. And of course, as well, with I'm in a lucky position. I'm exposed to people like yourself, like Jake, like Bob, and so I see their material, and two, I see their approach to the training, and so I'm like, oh my good, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. That's a really good point. Maybe I should try and do it that way. So again, for instance, I was just reading something the other day, and I thought, oh, let me try that. So I've been doing an hour of that every day to see if it changes anything or see if I notice any differences. So I'll try and do maybe 5 to 10 hours of something to see what information I can receive from that. I'm kind of took it like a sort of like a scientist approach. Is like uh you know, and again, this is from Mark and this is from Bob. I got this influence is that you need to do X amount of hours of something to gain some sufficient data as to how that's going to affect me. And I'm going to journal that as I go because we forget everything. As soon as you get off the meditation mat, it's all gone. So I journal that, and then I can look back and see, oh my goodness, that really did have a significant change. So maybe I'll do it more like that now. So yeah, it's a bit organic, but I'm taking on the lessons of others and trying to experiment with it and to see whether I can gain more from what is from the outside the same exercise. But it's not the exercise is the exercise, but it's how you approach the exercise, your method of doing the exercise, the way you frame the exercise within all of the training. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've heard other people taking a very similar approach. So yes, I'm really glad that that's working for you right now. I have had a lot of clients say to me that they think the first book and then the key to the true Kabbalah comes after, and then the second book is just extra. I've actually had clients tell me that,
Mm.
and I've always been like, well, maybe that's a good point because I hear so many stories like yourself of working the letters and it complementing IIH a lot.
Yeah, I think obviously you can do it anyway, and it can probably work. I mean, the way I see it is one theoretically. I know I read before I was at that level. I read years ago, well, the spirits are going to treat you in a certain way prior to the Kabbalah and a certain way after. And that's the more I do, the more that rings true. The more experience I get, the more I see that's true. But also I see when you're, let's say at step eight, where at the end of step eight, where Barden says you now can, according to his rule set, go on to PME. I still think that's a big jump for a lot of people. Um, because though in I believe if it's is it step nine, though in those latter stages he gives you work with the elementals in their regions, visiting the earth realm, visiting the different regions, and it acts as somewhat of a bridge between IIH and PME. It's still a huge jump to start going from doing this set of practice and sort of working with you know entities. I still think that's a big jump for a lot of people, maybe psychologically. So the work I think in KTQ is probably, in my mind, more valuable in the long term. But also through doing that work, your maturity, your understanding of things, your ownership of things, um, I think brings you up to a level where that jump to PME is not really a jump anymore. It's more just sort of a sidestep. It closes that abyss a little bit, and that it's not so maybe kind of like a huge scary leap into the unknown. You're now probably at that point, especially once we're working with the letters a lot, you're going to be experiencing a lot more things. Everything you were doing in initiation is accelerated because of the potency of the letters. So your your work with PME is far less scary. You've got a lot more confidence in your abilities, I believe. Yeah, so I think either way can work, but probably the more relaxed way is yeah, IH, KTQ, PME.
Sounds good to me. It definitely fits with my own intuitive perception. So, yeah, that sounds like a great way to go about it. And again, I've heard from others, shifting subjects a little bit. I'm curious what you think of the actual life of Franz Barden, because there seems to be a whole lot of different accounts. Do you just kind of hold it as a question that's a comfortable question of how his life was, and the main thing is we have the literature?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one because I'm first of all obviously immense gratitude that this work has been put together and that it was put out. And I think his words at the beginning of initiation ring true for a lot of people, where he's saying, that people have been crying out for this knowledge. And it really was that case for me, in that I was like, oh, this is exactly what I need. In terms of his life, I don't know what to think too much because I don't know really what's true. I mean, people say he's a walk-in. I hear now clients say I've got no idea. I've got absolutely no idea whether he was a walk-in, whether he wasn't a walk-in, and I kind of think it doesn't matter too much. Um, it, what matters is that he put these books together and he put them out. You know, anything else about the man, I hope I don't offend anyone here, but anything else about him, I just don't know. And I don't think anyone else can know either, because it's all just belief. People believe he was this sort of man or that sort of man, or someone believes that they're in contact with him. Well, that's great, but that's still a subjective belief or a subjective experience. And that can't really inform me as to the man. From everything, from putting this book out and from the history we can see, I believe subjectively that um, he was doing what he felt was absolute best for those seekers out there. I believe that he was teaching people in his own way, and I believe initiation was the safest thing he could put out. You know, so I believe probably there's an order of training if you're working with him personally. Maybe because I mean, even in was it in Frabato, where after only a shorter period of training, he was asking what his personal God would be, right? He was sort of asking him a question about a step nine personal God very early in his training. So I think working with him personally was very different to what the book was. The book was the best he could do to safely serve as many people as possible, knowing that he'd have no interaction with those people. So he had to do it in a very steady and safe way. Yeah, but about the person and his personality, I just don't know, and I don't think anyone else can know either. I think there's lots of beliefs out there. Very few of us. I think there's a few people still around who have met him. In his, I think there's someone even that joined the students of Franz Barden group the other day who actually they say they saw him in one of his magical performances. So there's a few people still around that can give first-hand witness of him. But yeah, I don't think about it too much. I'm just thankful because it's one of those things where there's no real solid answer. Any answer that I choose to invest in is just a belief. So it doesn't really serve me too much. The only thing I can do is focus upon what he provided and do my best to reach the requirements that he put forth.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, I'm the same way. I hold it as an open question, and there's no
Mm,
reason for me to necessarily know, but the literature and the training has certainly helped me a lot in my own journey and kind of confirmed, I think, in the beginning what I had come to understand as the way the metaphysics of the universe works. So that's how I knew it was right for me, especially reading in the theory section. I kind of was like,
yeah,
yeah, this is kind of the way I see things too. And if he can take me to a new level, that's absolutely fantastic. So,
yeah.
yeah, I have immense gratitude as well. So, it's really good to hear. So, what about, let's see how we're doing for time. Got time for maybe one
Oh yeah.
last question, or so. Going back to some of your training with Tibetan Buddhism, I've heard people put forth that some of Barden's training is very similar to the secrets of Tibetan Buddhism, or the secret teachings of Tibetan
Mm.
Buddhism. And maybe they're not so secret now that they're coming forth in the world and spreading them. But I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts about that are with some overlap, maybe.
Mm. Um, yeah, I mean, in terms of individual techniques, I mean, there's lots of similarities with lots of traditions, but I think the main thing that maybe if people say that, maybe what they're meaning or the way I see it is that when you look at the personal God and the invocation practices of, I believe it's step 9. Correct me if I'm wrong. Um, but basically, where you're working with your personal God and you are joining with. This is very similar to Vajrayana. So in Tibetan Buddhism, there's different vehicles. Yeah, so Vajrayana would be the speedy path, the diamond path, towards ultimate enlightenment, and Jalu, rainbow body. Yeah, Mahayana, which is the Bodhisattva path, coming back. But the Vajrayana has like the said say the secret methods. Yeah, Mahayana is much more kind of general methods, or then the lower level. They call it lower, but it's not really lower. The Theravada, which is the solo practitioner to gain arhathood, or enlightenment for yourself. So the Vajrayana there uses what they call skillful means, and some of those tantric practices would be that you have a deity and then you prescribe qualities to this deity, or that you're told what these qualities are, and then you would join with this deity, and you do a practice where you join, you merge with this deity, you invoke this deity, and thereby you take on the qualities of this deity, which would, and you repeatedly do this, and which would thereby increase or improve yourself and bring yourself up to that standard, which is essentially what I see the latter stage with your personal God in Barden's is. So that's when people say, "Oh, there's similarities to Tibetan practice." Straight away, I'm like, for me, it's that practice. So I see Barden's initiation into Hermetics as a Western method of Vajrayana.
Right on, right on. I think that makes complete sense to me. And,
Yeah.
incidentally, it's always been much easier for me to get in touch with the Akasha than it has been to work with the elements. Obviously, if I'm in strong touch with the Akasha, the elements kind of fall into place naturally.
Mm.
Yeah, the diamond path, I've got some familiarity with that. So yeah, that certainly makes sense with Barden's teachings. And I don't know, is there some other nuggets here that you feel compelled to share?
Uh, Well, let me think. Let me think. About my practices or Vajrayana or Bardens.
All of the above. You can talk about your day-to-day life.
Well, I mean, I think for me, let me think then. I think for me, um, and obviously this is probably this. I say for me because this is for me based upon my challenges and my mental makeup and things like this. But for me, I found early on that what was a great help to everything. So regardless of what I was doing, a great help was always concentration. Okay, so no matter what you're doing, it's always good to be able to concentrate more, to have more of that, to have more of that oomph. Um, and so what I found, and people maybe are familiar with this, is that I found Muni Sadhu's concentration manual. It's an old book, um, uh, but it's got some wonderful practices in it. And for me, this was something that allowed me to make a lot of progress with Bardens. And I know in general, when you want to get something at when you want to get better at something, it's usually just better to do that thing. But in this case, doing Muni Sadhu's exercises actually helped me a lot in getting better at the Barden exercises. I'll give you one example, which I've mentioned in lots of blog posts, is his clock exercise. So he would have a clock with a seconds hand. So the seconds hands would tick round like this. Um, and basically, you would watch the seconds hand and the idea is to only have your mind on the seconds hand. Now, he has a concept, he has an idea that we can only concentrate on one thing at a time. We know from Barden's that's not true because we can have tripolar concentration, a color, a sound, a feeling. But when you do Muni Sadhus, you just sort of take on his belief and go, okay, I can only have one thought, one concentration. So he says to concentrate on that the end of that seconds hand as it goes around nothing else to the exclusion of all other things. As soon as you have even a slight inkling of something else, you stop. So maybe you only lasted 12 seconds. So you would times that 12. Let me go 10 seconds so I don't get confused with maths. you you do 10 seconds and you times it by three. Yeah. And so now your goal is 30 seconds. Okay. Once you achieve your 30 seconds, you times that by three. And you continue until you can reach 5 minutes. And now this means that you're looking at this seconds hand, and suddenly you feel an itch. Your mind's gone. It's gone. Reset. You're looking at the seconds hand, and suddenly you think of your toe. It's gone. It's any of those, even the distant seed thoughts mean you've gone away from the seconds hand. So it's a very strict requirement. But if you can do it, even up to 1 or 2 minutes, the transference to your abilities in Bardens, I found was really, really, really useful. So that's one thing that I want to share that really helped me. Um, Another thing I would say is basically simplifying training. So let me put it this way. So I've got a hand. It's always with me wherever I go. So with my hand, I can look at my thumb, I can remember my thumb, I can visualize my thumb. So I've got my visualization tool. With my thumb, I can project into my thumb. You know what I mean? So like it sounds kind of silly, but like this means because when I was at work or when I was having to travel from one side of the island to the other to go to work, I would visualize my thumb, I would project into my thumb, I would breathe into my thumb, I would do all of the exercises, but in my thumb, just while I'm sitting on the seat there. And obviously, you could just use your hand, but I was just using my thumb. Um, and so it's about basically taking those exercises and just doing them and doing them and doing them and doing them, um, and making it so kind of like automatic. So as soon as I'd sit on the train, I go, okay, thumb, remember it, see it. I can see it. All right, project into it. Boom. So I sort of make my training time very useful because for me, the sitting in the morning or the sitting in the night wasn't really the the progress time. The progress was made in the day. So how much could I maintain my train of thought? How much could I retain awareness of the moment, right? Because it's like you can be aware of the moment and you go, okay, let me be more aware of the moment. So now my awareness of that has increased. But why wasn't I there before? So how much can I retain awareness of that texture of the moment through the day? So that begins with just a few minutes. But then as you carry on and you're able to maintain that more and more, obviously Barden says we must be in the day, we must be present to the day, true. But also I think we need to be present to the texture of the moment. Yeah. The absolute awareness of that moment. And then that I find when you can do that through the day, then my morning and my evening sessions of training, sometimes only my morning because life happens. And when I do my exercises, my success in those exercises is more of a gauge. It's like a progress report. That's not where I'm growing. I'm growing in the day. But my morning, how successful I am in those exercises in the morning or the night is telling me how my days are going. Do you know what I mean? Um,
Absolutely.
so that for me was a big thing. Instead of going, oh no, I didn't do my morning practice, I'm not going to progress. Is no, my day is where I'm going to progress. Yeah. And then my morning is going to be where I test it. So that
Fantastic.
was a big one for me.
Yeah, yeah. I think you've given a lot of helpful tips for listeners. I think a lot of this has been very valuable. I guess as we begin, it's kind of a bit late here for me. I just I'm in the mountains right now. I used to
You're
be
in the
in,
mountains.
yeah, yeah, I'm in the mountains. So it's kind of nice. It's always
Lovely.
good. It's mountain quiet and very much enjoying it. I used to be a night owl and always stay up for the witching hour, but I'm kind of
Mm.
finding myself not doing that as much anymore as I get older.
Is this
So,
a recent move, Clint? Have you just recently gone over there?
oh no, no, no. My dad lives in the North Georgia mountains, so
Oh,
I just go to visit him sometimes and get the added bonus of a kind of mountain retreat of silence
wonderful.
and nature. Yeah, yeah,
Very nice.
yeah. So any closing thoughts before we stop the recording?
Um, well, other than thank you for having me on again, that much appreciated. And nice to chat to you again. Yeah, no real closing thoughts other than I think I think probably again what I've seen most recently as well. I get lots of emails and messages and it's just lovely to have. But I think the most important thing is there's lots of talented people like Clint, like
Thanks.
Jake, like Bob, like Mark, like so many good practitioners around that have done their bit, they've put their time in and share valuable information. But I think the main thing that I saw is people messaging me and saying, well, I'm doing this and I'm gaining success, but so and so says I should do it like this. You know, so this is like, guys, we're adults, right? So it's like everyone's going to do it a different way, and there can be 50 ways that work, and it depends on your personal constitution, your thinking, your past, your history. So the thing is taking ownership of your own. Even though I run Perseus, where we have teachers, which I call it more the coaching approach, right? You guys are coaches. Yeah, it's not like a guru structure. It's a coach giving you insight, helping, sharing information, sharing methods. But at the end of the day, personal ownership of your path. No one else is going to do it for you. People can help, people can accelerate your progress through sharing methods and their own experience. But at the end of the day, I'm seeing messages of people going, well, so and so says this, but so and so says this. So there's this kind of paralysis. What's the word? Paralysis by analysis. There we go. They're sort of this inaction because they're not confident in their own decision. So I think one of the things is, you know, basically you must, if you're watching this and you're in the early stages of Barden, you must trust yourself. You can't let your mind be swayed by someone else's experience. It's not their experience is not more valid than yours because Barnes and until you get up to changing, temperatures that other people can feel, things like that, it's quite subjective. So you must have confidence in your own experience and accept that experience as a success and move on. You can't let that success be changed or whipped away from you because someone else said you did it wrong. So, take on the experience of other people, let it help you, let it guide you, let it inform your decisions, but don't let it change your decisions or your approach. So I think personal ownership is something that just have confidence in what you're doing and crack on and do it. If you need guidance later on, ask for it. But otherwise, have confidence in your own experiences of meditation and your own experiences of the elements and the kasha.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's interesting. I get clients writing me all the time saying, "Am I doing this the right way?
Yeah.
How do I know whether it's time to move on? You say this, but another teacher says this." And I always tell them, go with your gut, develop your own
Mm,
intuition. You don't have to listen to my way. If a different way speaks to you, go with that. So
absolutely.
for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. I think that's great. Well, thank you so much for being on here. And if you could stay on a little bit after the recording stops, that would be great. But
Will do.
I certainly value you as a colleague and a fellow practitioner. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Clint. My pleasure. Anytime. Yeah.
All right, we will be in touch.